everyone. I hope everyone is having a happy Friday. I mean, it is Friday after all, so it's the end of the week. Hopefully everyone has had a good week. I know that is somewhat of an impossibility because even in the United States, there's 300 some odd million people, and not all of them are going to have a good day on the same day, especially since they have counter interests. But nevertheless, I still wish it, even though it's somewhat of a, a wish that's not necessarily going to go anywhere. That's it. Let's do the news. Interesting news leaked, or that came out from the New York Times yesterday on Mohammed bin Salman, and the Jamal Khashoggi killings, revolving around, you could say, behind the scenes leaked information or leaked conversations that MBS was having in relation to Khashoggi. One inflammatory statement was that there was essentially a bullet with Jamal Khashoggi's name on it if he doesn't come back to Saudi Arabia. And you can imagine, even if he came back to Saudi Arabia, there was definitely going to be a bullet with his name on it. Nevertheless, let's do just a little backstory, just in case someone doesn't know what I'm talking about. This is Jamal Khashoggi, the grinning woman who seems happy as can be with Jamal Khashoggi. This woman, Jamal Khashoggi, wanted to be his wife, and he needed to get a marriage certificate, or a certificate saying that he wasn't previously married, from the Turkish embassy. Khashoggi, a Saudi, you could say close to the Saudi royal family, was an exile to the United States. And in being so, worked for the Washington Post as a columnist. Some of those columns were not necessarily all that flattering to MBS, the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, a religious theocracy and a close ally of the United States in the suppression of people in that region. Apparently, MBS did not particularly like this guy, what Khashoggi was saying about him, and in some of the conversations made specific note to, if he doesn't come back here, there will be a bullet. I'm going to put a bullet in him. This takes place a year before Khashoggi is bag overhead, fingers cut off, and dismembered with a bone saw. So this looks somewhat bad. Now, the CIA's assessment, or the intelligence community assessment, has been that MBS ordered this. MBS has said, it wasn't me, it was people below me that did this, I didn't have anything to do with this, and I want to see that all of these people brought to justice just like everybody else. Other assessments have made the point that nobody else in this area would have ordered this other than him. I'm inclined to believe that to be somewhat true. My strong suspicion in this was that he didn't necessarily grasp that the international community would be so much against this. The moment that Khashoggi was killed, this set off red flags all across the world. Now, I'm saying this as somebody who's going from place to place to place to place, and in every country that I was in, going from Africa all the way into the other parts of Europe, like Poland, this story was on the news, and this story was the lead story going for weeks on end. This has had certain consequences. Some of those consequences has been, you could say, the underbelly of the United States from the standpoint of the right and the left have found some level of agreement that there needs to be some consequence for MBS doing this. You have other countries in Europe that have also come to a similar conclusion, and I've watched debates on this in the European Union where there were calls from either outright repudiation and other calls for some level of sanctions. Whether that takes place or not is unclear. Many of these countries have financial relationships with Saudi Arabia where they use their oil to buy weapons and buy other things that those countries are selling, in which case they don't want to get rid of those relationships that they consider to be fruitful to the country. Donald Trump, if I'm not mistaken, made a similar argument. In fact, that argument was more honest, even though that argument was like cringeworthy. But nevertheless, the CIA and the intelligence community assessment, like I said, was that he did it. But up to this point, nobody has really gotten into conversations that had taken place, and they've started to comb records to find those conversations in order to attribute blame. And they've been able to find conversations in which he's been having that get across, at the very least, there was motive, there was incentive, and there was an ability to do something about it. Not to mention, we have the end result with Khashoggi in a Saudi embassy vanishing, which Turkey later screams almost immediately that Saudi Arabia had the guy killed. A bunch of thick-necked guys with large beards brutalized him, and apparently dumped the body parts. So let's take a look at some of the background on this story. I'm fascinated by the New York Times reporting here. Like, somebody had to leak this. Now, part of this is this kind of this other part that's a little strange. Not strange, but maybe cold comfort. If you're one of those people who are in Yemen, or if you're one of those people who are under the boot of this government, maybe you're one of those women that are put in prison, potentially being put to death because you're determined to push back against the government and get behind the wheel of a car. Maybe one of those people who've been crucified. Whatever bad end you receive in dealing with this particular government, particularly from the standpoint of the war in Yemen, where tens of thousands, up to 100,000 people have been either killed, starved, I want to say weaponized disease, but that goes under this idea of killed. Or you said disease is different than killed, even though it's being weaponized. But nevertheless, you get my point. But one guy, like, the international community flips out. Like, oh my God, I can't believe they did this. While simultaneously, bombs being dropped on various parts of Yemen for like a year now. Like I said, cold comfort. But at the very least, people are complaining about this. Jamal Khashoggi, again, Saudi, he bet on the wrong horse, meaning he bet on the wrong prince, and there were consequences. The year before killing, Prince told he would use a bullet on Khashoggi. So there are various parts of this that I want to get into. And so I'm trying to, 7 minutes, all right, let's try to do this in 2 or 3 minutes. This story is not, there's not much to this story, but this, I've been covering this and I find this interesting. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, yes, Salman of Saudi Arabia, told a top aide in a conversation in 2017 that he would use a bullet on Jamal Khashoggi, the journalist killed in October, if Mr. Khashoggi did not return to the kingdom, and in his criticism of the Saudi government, according to current and former American foreign officials with direct knowledge of the intelligence reports. The conversation, intercepted by American intelligence agencies, is the most detailed evidence to date that the Crown Prince considered killing Mr. Khashoggi long before the team of Saudi operatives strangled him inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul and dismembered his body using a bone saw. That is, God, that's hard to hear. Like, whatever you want to think of Khashoggi, just from the standpoint of a person, when you see a picture like this, it is a hard thing to grasp with somebody being bag over their head and almost kind of this mob hit, with the odd expectation that nobody was going to miss him after being killed in this kind of high-profile way. It was such a bizarre thing. Talk about power going to people's heads. It screws their view of the world. A conversation intercepted by, let's see. Right, prompted week of outrage. Let's keep going. The Saudi government has denied that the Crown Prince played any role in this. President Trump publicly shown little interest in trying to get the facts about who's responsible. Yeah, because if you find out who's responsible, you're stuck with the results of that. If you found that Bob robbed a liquor store, then it's going to have a particular impression of Bob. Now, if Bob needed to pay for diabetes medicine for his mom or pay for some kind of surgery, fair enough. But all things being equal, if Bob is robbed in a liquor store, you know, it's like, did Bob get liquor out the store when he robbed it? And if so, you're probably going to have a perspective of Bob. The conversation appears to have recently transcribed and analyzed as part of an effort to intelligence agencies to find proof of who was responsible for Mr. Khashoggi's death. The National Security Agency and other spy agencies are now sifting through years of the Crown Prince's voice and text communications that the NSA routinely intercepted and stored. Of course they're spying on him. It's a foreign power. Just like Turkey had a bug in the embassy. Why wouldn't Turkey have a bug in the embassy? This is a government that's, you know, near its own and can have political consequences, meaning Turkey has to be aware of what Saudi Arabia is doing, and so it makes all the sense in the world for Turkey to bug the Saudi embassy, meaning when Turkey was screaming at the height of their lungs that, oh my God, they just killed a guy at our embassy, they weren't doing that for no reason. They were doing it because they wanted the United States to be the lead in the investigation in this and to deal with it, because if Turkey has to deal with it, it becomes a different issue. That's a regional. I hope that makes sense. The United States being somewhat of a partner of Saudi Arabia, they were hoping that the United States would take lead in the investigation of it. But Trump had little interest in this, in which case more and more of the communications showing what happened to Khashoggi started to be leaked. Let's see. The conversation between Prince Mohammed and Aide, Turkey Al-Dakil, took place in September 2017 as officials in the kingdom were growing increasingly alarmed about Mr. Khashoggi's criticism of the Saudi government. The same month, Mr. Khashoggi began writing opinion columns for the Washington Post that top Saudi officials discussed ways to lure him back to Saudi Arabia. This is motive. In the conversation, Prince Mohammed said that if Khashoggi could not be enticed back to Saudi Arabia, then he should be returned by force. If neither of those methods worked, the Crown Prince said he would go after Khashoggi with a bullet, according to officials familiar with intelligence reports produced in December. Now, you could say, well, dude, he didn't shoot him with a bullet, and he didn't use the bullet from his own hand. He was strangled and dismembered. I would make the point that the bullet is probably a metaphor and not necessarily to be interpreted directly as a specific, flat fact thing that he was trying to do. I think this more, revolved around the idea that I'm going to kill him. And whether I do use my own hand or I use somebody else's hand under my order, same difference. American intelligence analysts concluded Mohammed might not have meant the phrase literally. Well, of course, he didn't mean it literally. At the time of the conversation with Al-Dakil, Prince Mohammed was in the midst of consolidating power in the kingdom. Just months earlier, his father elevated him to second in line for the throne. Okay. In 2017, Mohammed ordered hundreds of influential businessmen and Saudi royals, some of whom have been considered contenders to the throne, locked up in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Riyadh, the Saudi capital, where they were being interrogated. This is a power consolidation. You could call it somewhat of a red wedding, but in a literal sense. There are people who may be vying for the throne. There are people who may challenge my power base. It's time to, what is it called? Culling the field or whatever? Or let's say laying low the field. Days before the conversation with Mr. Al-Dakil, according to the same intelligence report, Prince Mohammed complained to other aides, another aide, Saud al-Qahtani, that Mr. Khashoggi had grown too influential. Prince Mohammed, I'm not going to keep calling him Prince, the stuff is made up. Mohammed said that Mr. Khashoggi's articles and Twitter posts were tarnishing the Crown Prince image as a forward-thinking reformer. I love that. And the criticism was more cutting because it was coming from a journalist who had seen supportive of his agenda. When Mr. Al-Qahtani said that the move against Khashoggi was risky and could create an international uproar, his boss scolded him. Saudi Arabia should not care about international reaction and how it handles its own citizens, the Crown Prince told Mr. Al-Qahtani. This was my thinking, right? Like, my thinking was, if it was me, when I look at this stuff, I think, damn, I blew past my time window. Well, when I look at this stuff, I think to myself, if it was me, what would I do? If I was in that position, if I grew up in a position of power like that, and for the most part, what you want, your will be done within your corner of the world. Is it possible that you get a little too big for your britches and you think that you have more influence, especially from an international community, than you actually do? And I suspected that was more likely. I mean, you're in a totalitarian government, and your world, the way you frame the world for the most part, is that whatever you want, for the most part, takes place. Yes, there's somewhat limits on your power, just in general. You're not going to live forever, and you're still working through a certain power base, so you can't necessarily do any and everything you want, particularly if it's adversely affecting other people who are in your power base to allow you to maintain your power. But for all things being equal, you have free reign and dominion over your particular area. With a warped perspective of the world like that, what does international politics look like? And is it easier to make a misstep on international politics when you don't necessarily see the world clearly? My answer was yes, which is why I felt like this was more likely to be true. If you look back at my old videos, I think I said as much. Look at the world a particular way. Days after the conversation, one about Mr. Khashoggi with a bullet wrote his first column for the Washington Post. Saudi Arabia wasn't always this repressive. Now it's unbearable. Meaning, he was already angry at Khashoggi. Then Khashoggi was still writing articles like, now Saudi Arabia is unbearable. It was a withering attack on Prince Mohammed's crackdown inside the kingdom. I have left my home, my family, my job, and I am raising my voice, Mr. Khashoggi wrote. To do otherwise will betray those who languish in the prisons. I can speak when so many cannot. Of course, the NSA declined to answer. Saudi Arabia, of course, denied anything having to do with it. And I think that's going to be the end of this. All right, I'll end this here then. I mean, that's pretty much everything that was associated with it. Up to this point, we hadn't heard internal deliberations between the two. That's why I thought the story was interesting. And this was a story that I was covering, so I wanted to give it. This is somewhat of a grim start to the morning, even though it's a story I did earlier with Assange. It's not necessarily big news, but it's positive news, even if it doesn't necessarily mean anything in the outright material world from the standpoint of something happening. So I'll end this here. Let's see. How can such a nice man be such a monster? Oh, how can such a nice looking man be such a monster? Oh, the Ben Solomon? Well, I mean, truly, if you grew up in that situation, you would be the exact same way. And I think you're as nice as, nice as punch. But I strongly suspect if you were born into that exact same family with the exact same family dynamics, you would be the exact same way or similar. Now, I say that only because he is that way. And you, being a person, is just like any other person, and will have certain things acting on you and certain worldviews that will be hard to get yourself away from. I mean, what is the perspective of a person who has absolute control in regards to what that person wants to do in their kingdom? And if that person is absolute control, does that person acknowledge limits? Meaning those limits being international limits of people who don't particularly like him very much, but is into kind of a business relationship. So it's kind of like a don't ask, don't tell. But, the first provocation, they're willing to throw you under the bus because they don't like you very much. Well, that's essentially what happened in a foreign capacity in these various countries. But again, the countries have certain entanglements that, regardless of all the bluster and hullabaloo, may not necessarily lead to any material difference. But it may. I mean, sometimes when there's a fire below, it has changes, if those changes bubble up over a period of time. It's just an odd, brutal thing that all of these people were being killed and massacred, or people in a particular area were being subjugated, but this one guy gets roughed up and dismembered, and the world freaks out. And I'm not saying diminishing the pain that Khashoggi went through at all. That is a hellish experience, to say the least. But it's like, how do you heft that against the tens of thousands that were killed before? I suppose they can make a justification of it's war, and because it's war, somehow okay. It's not okay. It's not okay. Just saying. I don't know. MBS did it. I think he did it. And these conversations kind of add on more fuel to that fire of, not only did he have motive, not only did he have incentive, clearly he had the reach and the ability to do it. You got all three. Not to mention, who else will order something like this? Just saying. I think powerful people do things because they can and it gets easier. Yeah, truly. Not just they can, that the psychosis in their heads. Like, the distinction between the person who's doing it versus the action itself. The further away that gets, the more jaded the perspective of the individual. Like, if he's not being touched materially by the things that he's doing, what's the lead? What's to stop him from doing them? You can say, well, he could be a better person. Good luck with that when there's nothing to force the individual to be a better person. I'm just saying there's nothing on him to stop him. Like, when you go do things in the world, you're going to be affected by the individuals that you do things to. It creates somewhat of restraint on you as a person from fucking over other people in these kind of gross overt ways. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be stuck with the response that those people give. What happens when that feedback mechanism has been completely decapitated? I suspect you get somebody like him. So, just saying. Alright, let me end this, because this video is going way too long. 20 minutes is far too long for this video. I have a list and slate of shows today, including a hilarious one by Alex Jones that I'm probably going to do next, because that one had me dying laughing this morning when I was arranging my shows. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. My wife and I are going to be doing a patron appreciation on Sunday. So please join us. And it should be good. She's going to be doing it with me. We're going to be doing the show together. She enjoyed it. The State of the Union show. And I enjoyed having her here on the show. And it seems like the audience liked it. So we're going to repeat that process maybe a few times. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Thanks all. I see you probably in like 10-15 minutes. Thanks. And we are...